Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar jointly presented to you by the Executive Center and the FinTech Association of Hong Kong. I'm Helene Lee. I'm the General Manager of the FinTech Association of Hong Kong, and I'm very pleased to be discussing this very timely topic on the future of work and the future of workplace with really two experts that are at the forefront of this. So let me welcome the two panelists first. We've got Chelsea Perino, Managing Director of Marketing and Communications at the Executive Center. Hi, Chelsea. And we also got Medhy Souidi, who's the Head of FinTech and StartupXchange at DBS Bank. Hi, Medhy.
Hello, really glad to be here.
Yeah, so actually, I think with COVID, let us spring right into it. With COVID, we've got a gap year, really. Everything grinds to a halt. And it has redefined the future of workplace, the future of work. So I'd like to just explore and get your insights to share with the audience. How has work changed and how has workplace solutions changed? Maybe I start with Chelsea.
Sure. I mean, I think we can all relate to the change in culture over the last year, right? I mean, the organizations' hands have sort of been forced into this remote work model, whereas in the past it might not have been something that was at least standard commonplace or written into the HR policies or the way the organization was structured. But in a lot of locations, Hong Kong, not necessarily included for everybody, but we're one of the less extreme examples, but I think all of us have experienced remote working in one form or another. For the Executive Center, obviously, we're in the flexible workspace business, so thinking about the way that you work in a more adaptable, mobile sort of way is kind of part of our bloodline, right? So we understand how that works. But I think it's been a very interesting and in sometimes challenging experience for people to try to mitigate how do we readapt the way that we work? How do we communicate in these sorts of environments when we're used to doing everything in person and in an office? So it's been interesting to see that transition.
Yeah, absolutely. Chelsea, I think you are at the forefront of this, looking at flexible office solutions. So thank you for those insights. Medhy, from a financial institution, and you work a lot with fintechs as well, in your role, what are some of the shifts in terms of the work and workplace that you have seen?
I think a great thing to share is like all the banks has done an amazing jobs in terms of financial institution because they allow many companies, many employees from the companies to work from home really quickly. Some of the banks, but also financial institution here in Hong Kong or in China, work in several sprints to release the workforce to be able to work at home via different softwares and use different tools as well. It was very interesting to see that. I think Lufax did it in 3 days. For me at DBS, it was totally different because I had already a laptop where I could connect from everywhere in the world. So when the COVID came in Hong Kong, it was directly in a couple of days possible to work from home before the first case start to raise in Hong Kong. I've seen that also with startups. Some of the startups were really well prepared because they has everything in place to work remotely, but other has to adapt as well. So they had to reprioritize some of their sprint to allow the developer to give access to the different software they have to use. But we have seen a lot of great news from HSBC and DBS saying that 40% of the workforce will work from home in the future. I think work from home will change and something will come back to the office if they have to use specific software, for example. But for the ones they don't need to be at the office on a daily basis or every day, they will mostly work from home.
Yeah, I think that's extremely interesting. Let me just, do a little bit of housekeeping here. All the audience, please feel free to use the Q&A button to ask questions of the panelists. It's not often we got a diverse, experts on the panel like this. So please feel free to ask questions. We'll try to get to them as soon as we can. Now, the next question, Chelsea, is probably more for you because, I'd like some figures, some kind of data points around how the flexible office solutions have become a part of, like the real estate, commercial real estate market. Are you able to share a little bit, shed some lights around that, Chelsea?
Sure. So there was a report that came out, I believe, at the end of 2019 that suggested that by 2030, 30% of all commercial office real estate will actually be flexible, which I think is quite an interesting stat. And I would postulate that perhaps that number will have even increased as a result of COVID, because that was before people had really experienced this remote work culture. And when Medhy said working from home, I totally agree with that, but I would even extrapolate that a little bit further to say, you know, we use working from home as an analogy for not working at the office, right? But really what we're seeing is this idea of a hybrid work model, and it's either a work in an office or a work from anywhere, right? And then work from anywhere might be working from an office with the executive center as opposed to your home base, or working from a cafe, or working from the multiple different third spaces that exist out there in the world where people have kind of already been working from already, just without really necessarily realizing it, right? And that's an exciting transition, because I think what it does is it opens up the opportunities to organizations to rethink their corporate real estate strategy and really take a step back and say, are we capitalizing on our space and utilizing the space that we have in our portfolio in the most efficient sort of way? And at the same time, also make the connection between the real estate that exists in that portfolio through the traditional lease model, and then look at the people that are actually using the spaces and say, okay, do we have the kinds of spaces that people need to be the most efficient that they can, to make them feel more secure? And I think the security piece of the puzzle is something that's really come into the forefront of consciousness over the last year. People are worried about coming into the office in a lot of instances, right? And so having the opportunity to make a choice for themselves about where they're going to work the best at that moment and the way they feel in that day, based off of the multitude of factors that exist, is going to be a big asset to retention for companies in the future.
Absolutely, Chelsea. You talk a little bit about, you know, the risk of coming into the office and sort of like amidst the pandemic. But I think there are also lots of challenges about employees doing the hybrid model or working from home, very real challenges, and also some risk in terms of not just cybersecurity, but also how do employees adjust to, you know, kind of where do you draw the line between are you working or are you at home, and all the rest of it. Maybe I'd like to pass to Medhy first for this. How do companies actually mitigate some of the risk and address the challenges of a hybrid work model or working from home, Medhy?
So basically, in many companies, they are using a VPN to protect the company, to protect the data. We have also a lot of communication from different companies explaining how to not leak information, confidential information to other parties. But the thing is, it's always preferable to be at home or be in a co-working space, for example, or I want to say a flexible place for working, but not a coffee, or a hotspot where you have more problem for the security and cybersecurity of your device. The other thing I think was really important is the communication we got from, for example, the FinTech Association, but also from the different companies about what are the best practice from working from home. Many companies try different solutions such as Zoom, WebEx, Teams, and for each solution, you always have a best practice to have. For example, Teams is maybe better for collaboration, where Zoom is maybe better for such as an event like today. But if you want to go to WebEx, maybe it will be more for many stakeholders in the same room. So I think that the company has done a good job to communicate about one, the risk, two, the best practice, and three, always keep in mind that even if you're working from home, it's maybe not the best place for you to work in terms of, I want to say, responsibilities sometimes with your families, or maybe with the setup that you have at your flat, because you share your flat with some roommate, for example. So some companies were able to also allocate some, I want to say, central resources, such as renting some offices, or maybe renting some seat on a co-working space for their employees, for them to be able to meet, maybe sometimes to print, to scan the document, but also to collaborate with other teammates.
Yeah, if I can just jump in there, I totally agree with you. And I think the resource perspective is one of the big challenges that a lot of people faced when they all of a sudden had to work from home, because so many people they weren't used to that, so they didn't actually have the office infrastructure that they needed to be the most effective or the most productive. And so what we've seen is the organizations that sort of came out ahead of the curve were the ones that identified what those resources were and then actually provided the infrastructure to their employees to allow them to continue to do work at home. And for us, we actually even saw that with some of our clients. So obviously we have multiple clients across a lot of different industries. And in some of the locations where from a government mandate perspective, we had to close our offices, people couldn't come in to get their, do their printing, some of them even left their laptops in their office and they couldn't come in and get them. And so part of what the service that we offered was to get those resources to people so that they could actually work at home. And we even brought people desks and chairs and helped them set up home offices to help with that productivity and help create that space. Because I think as a result of working from home, a lot of people have, as Medhy mentioned, realized the challenges of trying to share that workspace with people that are not doing the same kind of work that you're doing. Especially in Hong Kong, obviously we all know the size of apartments are not necessarily the most conducive to having multiple spaces where you live and where you work. And so I think maintaining that work-life balance has also been something that a lot of people have struggled with.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Chelsea. I think that mental health, apart from cybersecurity and other issues, how do you actually cultivate that sense of teamwork? Because actually, you could feel very isolated and very kind of not connected or less connected. Although you can use, tools like Slack or Teams and others, to try and, have a sense of a virtual team, but these are still very real challenges, to deal with. Now, I like to, flow on from there and say, so because, the way we work have really shifted so much, since the pandemic. So that begs the question, how would what is the purpose of the office, as we emerge out of COVID? And is it going to be very different? Is it going to serve a very different purpose? Who would like to take this first? I'm really keen to see, the different takes on that. Chelsea?
Sure. This is all I think about all day long, every day. So I think what we've realized and what is really exciting for us as a flexible office space provider and people who think about what role does the workplace actually play in the larger context of organizational productivity and job satisfaction and collaboration. It's much more than just four walls. It's a thing that's supposed to facilitate all of those things I just mentioned, or a space that's supposed to facilitate those things. And what we've realized, and we actually did an internal study of, or a poll of all of our employees. We have about 1,200 employees across 14 different countries, all experiencing COVID in different levels at different times. And we asked them, what is the number one thing that you're most excited to come back to the office about? And it was about meeting colleagues and having conversations face to face and feeling that personal connection with people. And I think what's interesting is that for a lot of organizations that didn't have any kind of remote work policy and people were expected to come into the office every day, they sort of held this remote working model as this golden chalice. Like, I can't wait to get to a company where I can work wherever I want, or whatever hour I want. I don't ever have to come. Maybe they don't even have an office. I'm going to live this digital nomad lifestyle. And that works for some people, but in reality, it doesn't work for most people. And the reason for that is people want face-to-face connections, and there are some things that you really need in office, or at least a collaborative environment where everybody can come together to be the most efficient, brainstorming, problem solving. And even more importantly than those organized meetings, because of course we can set up Zoom calls, but what I think a lot of people didn't realize was that so much innovation and so much knowledge about the way that a company is structured and about all of the other departments and all of the other people that you don't have direct personal relationships with, but you still know them, comes from those, we call them water cooler moments, right? And it means, you're getting a coffee, or you're standing at the printer, or you're walking down the hallway, or in the elevator with somebody that works in a completely different department than you, but you still have a conversation about that sort of shared experience, which is your company, right? And you learn something from that. You understand, what finance is doing and maybe one of the challenges they're facing, or there are a myriad of different things that come from that, but the pieces of innovation and just the sort of subtle subconscious knowledge that you build around the way the organization is structured, the goals, the way the business is moving forward are things that are really difficult to replicate in this virtual sort of format. So to answer, that was a long answer to your question, but the office is here to stay. And I think that the role it plays is just to bring people together and create an opportunity to build on those foundations.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. Thank you, Chelsea. Now, turning to Medhy, I think the question for you then becomes a little bit twofold, because I think for financial institutions like DBS, obviously the future of the office and what purpose does it serve? Are they making use of the office space differently in a hybrid and flexible kind of work mode? And also for the fintechs that you support, and that you head up, the StartupXchange. How are you seeing the commonalities and the differences between the financial institution and the fintechs in terms of the future of the office, Medhy?
So basically for financial institution, I think they did a really good job compared to other industries, because I have like many of my friends working in, like in luxury or marketing, and they still need to go to the office every day, where banks has like teams working 100% of the times at home and just coming sometimes to the office. Some of my friends working for other banks didn't go to the office for 1 year, I think. For us, we have like A and B teams, but it's really up to us. For example, some of the team are still working mostly at home. I think one of the big issues that we can have as an employee for a large institution is sometimes when we want to use some of the files on the cloud, or some of the software, it's really slow at home compared with the speed we can have at the office. And maybe like if you need to open like a huge Excel file on the cloud, it will take maybe 15-20 minutes to open it compared to the office. The other thing is most of the banks now are looking at how they can reduce working space at the offices. So some of the banks are looking to stop some of the lease for several floors in their buildings, and they will have more agile methodology where teams will come to the office, for example, day 1 and day 2, and other teams will come on day 3 and day 4, and will have access to hotspots. But this also has some issues, because you don't have all your belongings with you on your desk. It's not your desk, and sometimes you just have one screen or no screen, but sometimes you need to work with 3 or 4 screens. So these are the questions that we have. But for example, in DBS, new employees has to come to DBS together with the teams to learn all the knowledge that they need to learn for the first 6 months of their new contract with us. But after this, they can work, for example, remotely at home based on the accommodation from the team. For startups, I saw like a lot of startups are still working from their offices. Most of them are not thousands of employee companies, but mostly like 10 employees in the company. So they still go to the office for most of them. Maybe the sales functions are mostly more working from home than maybe the developers or the project managers. But for collaborating all together, so we find some couple of tools to do it, such as workshops tools online, or we limit it to the most important persons or stakeholders to be in the same room together, of course with a mask, to continue to move forward between the collaboration of a big company and a small company. Otherwise, sometimes, when you do ideation, it's still hard to not gather at least the main stakeholders in the same room to make progress, or to face the issues that we need to solve in terms of technology, in terms of project management, or sometimes in terms of commercial deals.
I think you made a really good point there, and we're seeing this in a lot of the different clients that we deal with, and we have 76% MNCs in our portfolio, so it's all big companies like DBS, and it's really kind of going back to the people that are a part of your organization and understanding a lot better what they actually do, which I think is sort of a silver lining that people might not have expected as a result of COVID, is that a lot of companies are taking a step back and saying, wait a second, who are all these people? What do they actually do every day? What resources do they need? Because it really does differ. So I run marketing, and I have my own desk, but if somebody suddenly told me I couldn't have one, I would still be able to do my job just fine. Don't tell my boss that. But other people they need the double screens, they need to have the infrastructure, they have to access all of these like very confidential sort of materials, right? And they wouldn't be able to do it in a cafe, whereas I don't deal with that kind of stuff on a regular basis. And so understanding who the different departments are and what sort of resources they need are allowing organizations to make those kinds of decisions where perhaps they can reduce their real estate footprint by a floor or by a certain percentage. But then they're saying, okay, but we definitely need to keep this amount because those people have to have access to permanent touchdown spaces on a regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to, that flows on nicely to my next point about, with this hybrid model, I think it affects the whole way in which offices are configured and spaces are being used. I mean, I was just at a big law firm the other day, and you wouldn't believe it. You feel like you walk into a cafe or a kind of, like a barista bar or something. So the way in which collaborative space, which is actually going to be the one of the main functions of workspace in a hybrid model. So how are you seeing this differently? I mean, maybe I turn to Medhy first. Medhy, are the banks looking very different in terms of how you configure that, and are space being used differently as a response to these hybrid models? What are you seeing on the ground?
So part of the team will work from home 100% of the times. It doesn't mean that they don't have to come for some meetings. But what we want to do at DBS, for example, is to have some specific location where the team can gather for meeting rooms, but also for all the accessories such as a printer or a scanner if they need it, but also conference room if they need to be with different stakeholders. And sometimes it's easier to connect to WebEx through meeting rooms than just your computer or your phone. So it's some things they want to implement here. I think for DBS, it will be between 20 and 40% of the employee force will work most of the time from home. We have seen that HSBC say 40% of their employees will work from home. New question for the employees now in terms of resources and cost is totally different. Big companies can make a lot of savings on electricity, AC, and other things, where people working from home will have to leverage on their own electricity and own bills to supply their demands of energy to stay proactive, right? So it's something I would like to see. And I think it will be a big discussion in the future, and maybe the companies will take a look at this. Otherwise, I think DBS is pretty clear how we can collaborate and how to collaborate with the managers. We have a lot of communication, we have a lot of informations, and also one of the parts we didn't mention here is training, how to upskill your employee working from home, how to give them access to the best practices in terms of trainings, and how we can support their growth. So it's something also that it's really important for large companies, and I think also for startups when they have new employees or they want to develop a new solutions or a new product. And it's something really important for both sides, large company and startups, yes.
Hey, that's a really great point, which I will come back to a bit later. The training, the reskilling or the upskilling in order to be ready. That's a fantastic point. But I'd like to get Chelsea's perspectives on, the workspace, how you're configuring it. Is it any different? Do you see, different demands from your clients, be it MNCs or others, in terms of that flexible use of space in a hybrid model?
Sure. So we've always been in the flexible workspace business, and over the last 10 years, we've really changed the way that our spaces are designed because people were looking for more of these collaborative environments. So even as recent as 2015, a lot of our offices didn't have big open collaborative areas. The pantry area was a small sort of high top table with a coffee machine and a refrigerator, and the rest of the spaces were utilized for private offices. If you walk into any executive center today, that is the complete opposite of what they look like. I mean, Helena, you guys work in our offices, so we have, the first thing you see when you walk in is a big, beautiful collaborative area with lots of different sorts of seating arrangements. What we've actually noticed is that some of the seating styles are used more frequently than others, particularly now because I think they allow for sort of natural social distancing. So we're taking all of those kinds of things into consideration as we build our new centers, which we are continuing to expand. I think from a hybrid working model, what we're seeing is that companies want they want more on-demand sort of flexible models, which is ironic because we are in the flexible workspace industry, but what we realized is that we even weren't as flexible as we thought we were. And so we spent last year going back through our product portfolio and looking at how we could be innovative and create even more flexible opportunities for people, so that if you need not just a co-working space to be able to touch down into. So say you're working in Central and all of a sudden you need to go to Quarry Bay for a meeting, and you come into the executive center and you want to sit in the lounge area, but actually you need to have a private call. Where are you going to do that? Well, not all spaces are conducive to having that private, that full privacy. Maybe the meeting rooms are booked, or, you know, there aren't meeting rooms of the right size, et cetera, et cetera. So what we've done is we've looked at utilizing some of the private office spaces that we have, and giving those as more flexible models for people to take on an on-demand basis. Because I think what all of us collectively have learned as a result of COVID is that things are unpredictable. It's really difficult, especially now, to know what, you know, the next 6 months is going to look like. And so from a business resiliency sort of perspective, having the ability to make changes and not get locked into these really rigid terms, particularly with regards to real estate, because it's one of the most expensive parts of an operation of an organization, right? HR number one, real estate number two. Having the ability to scale up and scale down and not get locked into these terms and make predictions when you really are unsure about what the business future is going to look like is a really valuable tool and resource for organizations, both big and small, to have, especially now.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the need for diverse, usage of the space in a hybrid model has never been more challenging than before, because you could have fairly, private office, or, as you said, the water cooler area was pretty much standard. But now then, you need a lot of collaborative space and team space. Medhy, just really quickly, before we turn to the training question, which I think is really interesting that you brought up. Do you see very different, kind of usage between the fintechs that you support in your role and in the bank itself? How different are they?
I don't really see many difference, because most of the teams, I think now, or in a banks like DBS or in fintechs, are using the same solutions right now. And I think education was done last year, so best practices were shared by everyone's in fintech and banks. So after this, it will be always I want to say a kind of a best practice for the size of or scalability of your company, right? But yeah, it's true that maybe like fintechs or startups will be more proactive to still meet face to face, where maybe in the banks, people will be mostly really cautious about the risk, and we prefer to have like maybe VC instead of meeting face to face.
I think it's also important to realize that, especially with big companies that have multiple offices in multiple locations, it's really hard to work within sort of a universal work model. And so I think that's another sort of unexpected positive result of everything that's happened in the last year, is that organizations are starting to think more through the lens of frameworks as opposed to like universal, very rigid rules. And the reason for that is, as we all know, we're experiencing this pandemic in different sorts of levels of severity at different times throughout, the lifespan and throughout 2020 and moving into 2021. So it wouldn't make sense for, an office in the US to be mandating the rules for an office in Hong Kong. I mean, it could work, but does that really make sense? Well, probably not, right? Because the situations, the environments are completely different. And so what's exciting for me to see and for our organization is that we're finding people saying, okay, wait a second, let's take a step back and create frameworks and models, but really give every locale the opportunity to adjust those rules that will allow them to adapt and take advantage of the situation in that local environment.
Yes, very true, Chelsea. So we do have a few questions from the floor, and we do invite people to raise questions through the Q&A. But before we get to that, actually, Medhy just now brought up a very nice point about training, or upskilling or reskilling, because actually you need resilience. You also need flexibility to deal with this situation, and the fact that people cannot be together in one place. You might have a BCP, a business continuity plan, that mandates you work from different office locations, and all these. So how do you see that kind of training landscape coming out? Maybe Medhy first, are there other trainings that you see being implemented as a result of this hybrid model?
Yeah, I want to say that the situation last year was really something fast evolving, and we had a new type of roles coming in. So we got a lot of training about design thinking, data and analytics. Also, you have more and more adoption from the different companies about artificial intelligence, such as OCR, how to recognize your, for example, ID card or your credit card directly on your phone. For example, the ID card was used a lot for virtual banks last year for the onboarding of the client. But we have seen that upskilling and reskilling employees was something really important. In terms of statistics, I think last year, 7,200 employees at DBS were under some training programs related to data or analytics or design thinking. But the way that we interact is maybe sometimes different, because you need to have some small class online where you still need to have at least, I want to say, a moderator or a person coming to help you to learn the new knowledge that you need to have, but being in the same times also really engaging with the people online. Otherwise, it will be just a pure e-learning via videos or via articles. But when you have like someone engaging with the employees and asking them, to show the face, to also reply to some of the games they're doing or some of the questions they're asking, but also doing a team building through Zoom or Teams, it's really important. It's what I've seen different from before, where you were maybe in a room with one of the mentors coming and explaining all the things. Except that what I can say, not so much like this, but it's true that it's something really important for companies right now.
Yeah, I think that is really interesting how that, training and retraining has evolved. And I think the question for Chelsea then is, from that training and retraining, how does that actually, how does that imply that the Executive Center as a flexible office solution provider have to kind of organize themselves around these? Are you providing extra support as a result of this for your clients? And how are you seeing this, Chelsea?
It's a great question. I think there's sort of two lanes in which we've been thinking about training. The first is obviously helping support our clients that need to do the training for their employees, but then also, of course, training our employees, because we had to change so many different SOPs around the way we operate just to be open over the last year, right? So there were so many new governmental policies that started as big as the WHO and then went as, local as individual cities had certain policies that needed to be taken into consideration. And those policies, of course, as we've all experienced, change all of the time, right? So how do we disseminate that information to our employees? How do we empower them and give them the tools they need to be able to safely operate those offices, irregardless of what the environment situation is, right? So for us, the number one priority over the last year was to have our offices open whenever it was possible. So as long as the government didn't say everybody is required to close offices and everybody has to work from home, our offices were open, even if nobody was in them, because as the provider of a service, we needed to be there to support our members if they wanted to utilize those spaces. But then that also meant making sure that those spaces were safe and secure if people did want to come into them. So we had to change a lot of policies, everything from putting all of the different social distancing messaging into the common areas, to making sure that the buildings that we were in were also complying with the temperature checks. And if we needed double temperature checks, then we had to put those into our receptions. All of the travel documentation in terms of, if you come into the office, you have to scan a code now where it's the leave home safe kind of concept, right? So that we could track all of the people that were in the spaces in case, God forbid, something happens, right? So all of those were new procedures that we had to create and train our staff and make sure that they understood. And then, of course, we need to be able to also communicate that to all of our members. So for us, transparency was of huge importance over the last year. And I would say we even over communicated to our members what the environment was at any time there was a change in policy from a governmental perspective that impacted how and when our operating hours, if there were any new procedures that people had to follow. We made sure that the information was readily visible within the centers. There were emails that went out on a regular basis, and we made sure that all of our staff was informed. So if they were asked, they were giving the most up-to-date information. And we even helped some of our clients figure out how to communicate those same kind of messages to their clients. So I think it's really been a collaborative effort, a trial and error process for sure, but the adaptation rate was very fast, I would say.
Yeah, I think, you hit the nail on the head. SOPs get changed almost on a weekly kind of basis, and in different locations, where COVID sort of like, the situation develops differently. And I think that is part of the challenge that we are all dealing with, that, if we have a crystal ball, and I know we don't, if I could invite you both to say, what are like the top 2 to 3 actions that organizations must get themselves ready in order to emerge from COVID, as we are emerging from COVID? What might those actions be in order to be ready for that hybrid model, for emerging out of COVID and still as one piece? Medhy?
Sure. Few things I will think about will be a kind of a distributed working force model, when all employees will be given, for example, 40% of the times to work remotely. Another thing would be to have more agile squads and teams and also practices. We just mentioned it just before, is equipping also employees with skill sets of the future, because the skills of today are different from the skills that we will need tomorrow in terms of data analytics, for example, and redesign work and collaboration spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. And Medhy is also the co-chair of the FinTech Association's Big Data and AI committee. So he knows a thing or two about data analytics and all that. And definitely these are becoming very important in terms of the reskilling. Chelsea, how are you seeing this? What are the actions that are absolutely critical for the readiness as we emerge from the pandemic?
Well, I wish I had gone first because Medhy took all of the good ones. But I definitely agree that data is going to be hugely important and has been underutilized by a lot of organizations in the past. And right now, this is an opportunity to really dig into your workforce and understand who your people are and what they do and what kinds of resources and spaces they need to facilitate the best work, and not be tied down by preconceived notions and about what seemed like it was successful in the past. That would be the first thing. And then I think the second big thing is really embrace this idea of being flexible, and don't be afraid to try new strategies and new solutions, because as we've all learned, sometimes things that feel really scary end up actually bringing a lot of opportunities to the table. And so I would recommend being more agile and utilizing, especially, the next 6 to 12 months as an opportunity to try new solutions that you might not have been set up or equipped to do before, but now perceptions have changed and people are more open to the idea of trying something that maybe was not necessarily as interesting or well received as it was in the past.
Yeah, those are very good points, Chelsea. It didn't matter if you were the, to go after Medhy, not at all. This question is actually from the floor because I think, it's very obvious that mental health is a big issue, with the situation of COVID and all that. So in terms of the future of office, the future of work, how are office space users and how is everybody dealing with the kind of mental wellness of the employees? Are you working some more programs into that? Or what are some of the kind of mental wellness? And I don't just mean a yoga class here or, a meditation app or something to be installed. But, what are some of the things that you have seen, people working on? Maybe who wants to go first?
Yeah, I can go.
Yes,
I can go.
yes.
I think even something as simple as asking people how they are and how they feel goes a really long way. In the office, you don't necessarily do that. You get into a meeting and you go right into it, or you kind of have these casual conversations, but it feels less natural for some reason to do that if you're on a webinar or if you're having a meeting that's very organized with a start time and you all get online and then you need to get to work. And I think a lot of times it maybe feels for some reason a little bit strange to have sort of those five minutes of introductory sort of conversations to see how people are doing. And so what we've tried to do is be very conscious about, just taking a little bit of extra time to ask people how they feel outside of the context of whatever the meeting is or the reason that you're coming together. And I had a really interesting conversation with one of our clients a couple of months ago, and he said, now I just call people on the phone, which, is for some reason a really horrifying experience for a lot of people. If you get your boss picking up the phone and calling you, it's like, oh God, what, hello, is everything okay? It's like, oh yeah, I just wanted to say hi, see how everything is going. And I think that maybe that's an interesting opportunity for us to reconnect on a more human level. And then I've seen a lot of really great technologies that have been integrated into programming for us and for a lot of our clients in terms of, mental space apps and, online resources that help people talk about the challenges that they're having and sharing in those sorts of safe spaces. So I hope to see more of that.
Hey, Medhy, do you see similar things or is there a slightly different take from where you are?
No, a lot of good points here. I want to say that there is also at DBS, at least we have communication to take our leaves, like asking people to, relax a bit, do not hesitate to take days off time to times, just to refocus on themselves. Also, another thing is to switch off your device after, for example, 8 p.m. and not too late, because otherwise you still receive emails until maybe 10 p.m. and receive calls after this as well. And you need to have a limit between, if you're working from home, between the moment you are proactive for your jobs, but also the moment you need to take times for yourself as well. Also, communication I've seen is about doing sports and still socialize or have a regular discussion with maybe your colleagues or maybe with your family. So it's always, the small thing who can make a difference. But yeah, it's important to always take some breaks during the day, maybe just to drink a coffee or just drink some water, just relax 5, 10, 15 minutes, but also put some limits on when you start to work and when you stop to work as well.
Absolutely. It's very stressful times and very uncertain times that we are living through. Like Chelsea was saying, with SOPs changing, so rapidly. There's a lot for us to process. There's a lot for everyone to process at this time. So thank you for the very good advice. I think, we could go on talking like this forever, but in the essence of time, I want to leave some of the best thoughts for last. And some of that would include forward-looking kind of advice, tips. What do you think are the best tips for organizations, both FinTech as well as corporations, large multi MNCs and all that, to actually deal with that hybrid model? So maybe a few key pointers. What are some of the key tips that you think organizations need to equip themselves with in dealing with this? Chelsea?
I just have to go back to the people element of this. I think a lot of times organizations try to make changes with the best intentions in mind, but they actually aren't successful because they made assumptions about what they think people do and what they think people need, instead of actually asking people what they want and how they work and what works best for them and the sorts of resources and programming that would help them do their job better. And so I think to come out of this challenging period of time with a positive outlook and with a plan for the future, you need to actually ask the people that are a part of the plan what their thoughts are and use that input and that data really to build your strategy. And I think that what you would find, and what a lot of our clients have found, is that what they thought people wanted actually wasn't what they wanted. So I think that it will give you the opportunity to build something that people will actually use, instead of this field of dreams analogy, which is we're going to build something that we think everybody wants and then they'll just come and use it. It can actually end up being a lot of wasted time and resources. So that would be my number one.
Yeah, is that the reason why when you conduct that survey, like with your clients and members, you actually want to get this kind of bottom-up kind of feedback as to what exactly do they need, and how can, what are the support that will be most meaningful for them, right, Chelsea?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can share some of the changes that we're actually in the process of making and integrating into our new centers right now that came as a result of conversations with people that actually use our spaces. One of the pieces of feedback was we have really nice call rooms in our common areas, but the lighting wasn't optimized for Zoom calls. And all of a sudden now all we do is take Zoom calls all day long, right? So one of the pieces of feedback was like, can you put nice lighting in there so I don't look like a ghost when I'm on these endless video conferencing calls? And so we said, yeah, of course, that's actually a really good innovation that we can implement into some of our centers. And all of those changes in terms of layout and design that I mentioned previously, those all came off the back of feedback from the people that were actually using the spaces, right? So people said, look, we want these open areas where we can sit, we can come out of our private offices and have a coffee. We want to have, different environments within those shared spaces that we can use depending on what we want. So we listened to those, and those are the kinds of changes that we made. We even went back to old centers that were designed, 10 years ago, and refurbished them so that they took into some of those considerations into mind and implemented them into the design.
That's great. So we can expect studio quality Zoom calls soon.
Look at this.
Yeah.
I hope I don't look like a ghost on the other side. It looks okay on my screen.
Perfect, Chelsea, perfect. Hey, Medhy, what are some of the quick tips, important, takeaways that you want to leave, that you believe organizations really need to equip themselves with?
Sorry. I want to say that I agree totally with Chelsea. I think human experience will be more important and will replace maybe employee experience. So seeing employees as human and also helping them to grow in their different areas of their life, and focusing on the maybe physical, mental, and emotional health will be really important. Personal and corporate value alignment. So really trying to truly use the corporate values, not just hanging them on the wall, but for the employee, and trying to be really authentic and be true to yourself will be really important. And the last point I think will be certainly, to create a kind of a hybrid work, a virtual culture. So how to stick to your culture and share it with the different teams working at the office, but also working from home.
Yeah, I think those are extremely valid points. I think we have covered really a lot of grounds, today. Thank you for both of you, the immense input. Want to thank the audience as well. And I think this topic that we're discussing is still being unfolded. This is by no means a static landscape. Things are changing with vaccination, with the famous travel bubble that we are talking about. So Medhy would experience that working at DBS, Hong Kong and Singapore, probably going to launch the travel bubble shortly. So I think that the signs are positive for us to reemerge out from this. And I think we just need to be positive and resilient in terms of that. And that hybrid work model is definitely going to be here to stay. So my last, kind of quick take on that, and in the essence of time, is Chelsea. What are some of the future plans that you see in terms of the executive center or office solution providers needing to, equip yourselves, to better support your clients?
I think technology is going to play a huge role in the future in terms of the way offices are designed, both, the integration of better quality cameras and sound equipment and lighting for these kinds of conferences and all of the meeting rooms and conference spaces that we have, but also this idea of smart technology, so touchless entry and the understanding of and using of beacon technology to see how people use the spaces without having to ask everyone, so that we can make informed decisions based off of that data. I think that that's definitely the future, but for us, it will always be about the user experience fundamentally at the foundation of all the decisions that we make.
Absolutely. I think user experience is also at the foundation of fintechs that you support, Medhy, and also at the center of DBS when, the bank serves the clients. So, are there, further thoughts you'd like to add on to that? How do you see it different? Or do you see it differently? How?
Not really differently. I think we covered a lot of points during this call, and I will just repeat myself from what I've said just before. So I think this is my final words.
Thank you so much. I'd like to really thank both of you for taking the time today, sharing some of these really valuable insights into this fast-moving and still evolving future of work and the future of the office. So, on behalf of the FinTech Association, I want to thank both of you for that. And we hope there will be a chance for us to, carry on the second chapter of this discussion, maybe a little bit in the year. So thank you again, Chelsea, and thank you, Medhy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for everyone for joining.